hold on, stop. Hey, stop. Just calm down, okay? Just calm down. I see you hovering over that dislike button. Calm down. Just chill for a second. Just hear me out, okay? Just hear me out. I know you read the title and already have some very strong opinions you'd like to share, but let me explain myself real quick. First and foremost, yes, I did just take a shower before you start commenting about it. Second of all, I just want to say that after playing through Vice City Stories for the very first time recently, I do not think it's a bad game. I really don't. Actually, I think it's pretty good for what it is. But if that's the case, then why would the title of this video claim otherwise? And no, it's not just to clickbait you, I promise. Rather, it's because it's genuinely how I was left feeling after I finished the game. Look, I don't believe that saying this game is good right after saying this game wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be is making two statements back to back that directly contradict each other. Alright, I know this sounds a bit confusing, but if you'll just give me the time, I'd love to explain what I mean. Quick warning, it is going to be a bit complicated and it's going to take a little bit of time to elaborate, but luckily I've still got a whole 51 minutes left to do so. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Except this extra little bit of time just to add a quick disclaimer, but then I swear we're getting right onto it. Alright, so in my past two video essays, I did my very best to convince you to try out the game that I was talking about, and as such, I made sure not to go over their entire story so as to not spoil them for anybody who might have wanted to give them a try. However, I'm not making this video to convince you to play Vice City Stories. Rather, I'm more or less just reviewing the game, and that's going to include going over its story. So if you've never experienced Vice City Stories' story, not to be confused with Vice City Story, Liberty City Stories' story, or Toy Story's story, then I'd highly advise that you leave a like on this video, download it if you have YouTube Premium, close this video out, and then go through and watch the rest of it after you finish the game, because there will be a lot of spoilers from here on out. Still with me? Awesome. In that case, well, there's not really a good setup for this anymore since I got sidetracked with the disclaimer. To hell with it. Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories is a great game, but sadly, it just wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And over the next however many minutes this video ends up being, I'm gonna tell you why. Well, I already told you I was going to be getting into Vice City Stories' a story. Not to be confused with, wait. Ah, fuck, I already wasted that shitty joke. So let's just get right into it with an entire long and girthy chapter dedicated to it. Right off the bat, we're dropped into a very unique scenario for any Grand Theft Auto game in the sense that we start this one off working on an army base, which I think is probably the closest we're ever going to get to playing as a cop in GTA. Anyway, in the opening cutscene, we're introduced to our protagonist, Vic Vance, as well as our main antagonist, Sergeant Jerry Martinez. After a brief dialogue, we learn from Vic that the reason that he joined the army is because his family needs money, or more specifically, to pay for his asthmatic brother's medical bills. With his knowledge, Martinez takes advantage of Vic's situation by offering easy money in exchange for a few favors. But of course, since this is all happening in Vice City, those favors include smuggling drugs, gun running, and picking up prostitutes, during which you eventually meet fan favorite Phil Cassidy. Sure enough, Vic soon gets caught red-handed and is dishonorably discharged from the military. With nowhere else to go, you promptly begin to work for Phil, and then his cousin-in-law Marty, as you start getting acquainted with this version of Vice City. Through Phil's missions, you're introduced to the first of three rival gangs in the city, the Cholos, who are basically just your typical Hispanic street gang that are probably only here because Rockstar didn't want to go through the trouble of reusing the Haitian gang, which, for those of you who are unaware, Rockstar got themselves into a bit of controversy with the Haitian community back when Vice City first came out, which resulted in a few changes being made to later editions of the game. But I'd recommend you do your own research on that if you want to know more, since that's pretty off topic, and this video is going to be long enough as is anyway. But it's worth noting that by working for Phil, you're also working for Martinez, which obviously goes very well. Yeah, it only takes about 2 or 3 missions for Martinez to get sick of your shit, at which point he sets you up again to have you killed, leading to a fun mission with Phil chucking Molotovs at Martinez's men while you escape them. Meanwhile, through Marty's missions, it's revealed that he's the leader of his own gang in Vice City, and as you tag along with him, you play through a few missions that sort of act as a tutorial for how you'll run your own gang later on. But more importantly, as you progress through Marty's missions, you watch as his already strained relationship with his wife Louise continues to deteriorate due to his abuse, which soon leads to her leaving him to stay with her sister, earning herself a place on his hit list in the process. While she's living there, she and Vic start to become close, with the two of them going on dates and him going with her to retrieve her baby's things from Marty's. And before long, Marty has enough and kidnaps Louise from her sisters before preparing to kill her, which leads you to rescuing her by killing him first. Now with Marty out of the way, Louise suggests that you take over his gang, and while this is where things really start to get interesting gameplay wise, I'm gonna have to save this part for later because the gang management and empire building system is such a cool concept that it deserves its own dedicated chapter later on in the video. So for now, let's move on to a returning fan favorite character, Danny Umberto Robina, who gets in contact with you after Marty's death. And as it turns out, wait, hang on, I gotta take this. Alright, back to it. As it turns out, just like he is in Vice City, Isidore Cortez... Umberto is still obsessed with people's balls. So in order to gain him as an ally, you must prove to him that your balls are massive by doing some gang work for him, as well as disrupt his canon event of becoming an orphan by saving his father from the Cholos. In the midst of running through all these missions, you're frequently contacted by other characters through your pager. Yep, that's right, they brought back the pager from GTA 3 because cell phones weren't invented until, checks Google, 1973? Wait, what the fuck? Hang on. Vice City takes place in 1984. Why the fuck? Alright, hold on. Ah, fair enough, I guess. Alright, anyway, yeah, so we're stuck with this pager, which isn't necessarily a bad choice given the time period, but I will say that I'm not a huge fan of having to keep my eyes up in the corner of the screen whenever this thing goes off, because if I look away for even 1 second, I miss half the fucking message. But anyway, throughout the game, you get paged by various different characters, usually to inform you of a new mission at their location. Eventually, you receive a page to go to the airport to pick up your brother Lance Vance to join you in taking over Vice City, though admittedly, he tends to cause more trouble than he's worth. But that's okay, because I'm sure none of us can get enough of the Lance Vance dance. I mean, he just exudes the exaggerated swagger of a black 80s man. It just gives me goosebumps every time. What can I say? But once Lance is brought into the fold, he puts you in contact with a man named Forbes, who turns out to be an undercover cop working for the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA. And honestly, this is just kind of a side plot that doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't have any real impact on the story, I don't think, other than the fact that Lance uses his credentials for something later on. In the end, he dies a pretty uneventful death at the hands of the Vances. Also, real quick, it's worth pointing out that despite becoming fine with stuff like gun running, prostitution, and leading a gang, Vic has a very strong disdain for anything involving drugs. His reasoning is always that drugs cause more trouble than they're worth, but in spite of his opposition, he always ends up dealing with them in one way or another for one reason or another. Why am I choosing now to bring this up? Well, it's because this next part of the story that I'm going to talk about sets in motion a chain of events that dominoes throughout the rest of the story, and as you guessed it, it revolves around drugs. So a few missions after you kill the undercover cop, Lance finds out about a large shipment of coke that the two of you can steal and sell to be set for life. He pitches to Vic that it's one big job and then they're out of the game for good. And while Vic is initially very reluctant about doing the job, regardless of the massive payday, the one thing that convinces him to go through with it is the fact that it's Martinez's coke, which means he has a chance to get back at the man who screwed him over. Now, this is all well and good, but come on, Vic, you should know by now that 1, Lance is full of crap, and anytime that he says a job's gonna be easy, it's anything but. 2, revenge is a fool's game. And 3, we haven't even unlocked the other island yet, man. Do you really think the story's gonna end already? Right, fourth wall breaking aside, I just can't help but feel like Vic should have known better than to violate his principles to go along with Lance on this. But he makes his choice, and now we've got to live with it. Sure enough, it turns out that the drugs actually belong to the most powerful dealers in Vice City, Diego and Armando Mendez, and that Martinez was merely transporting it for them, which means that all 3 of you are now marked men. Now, to the Vance's credit, the job actually goes smoothly enough, all things considered, and Lance even finds a buyer for all the coke. However, when you drive back to Lance's after meeting with the buyer, you discover that every kilo of your stolen coke is gone, and so is your mom. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, a couple of missions ago, Mama Vance makes her first and only appearance in the game, claiming to be clean. But the thing about sticking an addict in a room full of drugs, well, I guess relapse is a bitch, huh? With Mama Vance gone with the drugs, you and Lance have no choice but to try explaining things to the Mendezes, which results in the two of you having to either work for them or be killed. The Vances choose the former option, obviously, but in order to earn enough favor to not be executed on sight, they have to prove that Martinez was the reason that the drugs were lost. Luckily, Martinez just so happened to join the witness protection program after you stole his coke, so after you take a few pictures of him with the feds, you use Forbes' ID to make it look like Martinez was working for the DEA the whole time. So now that you've... Wait, hold on again, one sec. Sorry about that, where was I? Right, yeah. So once you've earned enough of the Mendez's trust, they start putting you to work by having you steal drugs and expand their empire. While working for the Mendezes, you meet this... okay, hold on a second. Alright, I know this game takes place in 1984, and I know this game came out in 2006, but I'm writing this in 2023, and I am not touching this topic with a 50-foot pole. Right, so the game eventually refers to this person as a her, so that's how I'm going to address them. So basically, this person's name is Rennie, and she is actually the one who was going to receive your drugs a few missions ago, until your mom stole them, which shouldn't make it too surprising that she would know some of the most powerful dealers in Vice City. After doing a few missions for her, she puts you in contact with a couple of these dealers. The first one is Gonzalez, the right-hand man of Colonel Juan Cortez, not to be confused with Isidore Cortez, who gives you a few jobs until one of them goes south, at which point he decides it's best to cut ties. Yeah, fair enough. But this leads us to Ricardo Diaz, another one of Rennie's contacts and the top drug dealer in Vice City, second to the Mendezes. While working for him, you're quick to demolish Gonzalez's empire by stealing his coke and bringing it back to Diaz, who promptly exchanges it with the DEA for some arms upgrades. Defeated by your actions, Gonzalez tucks his tail between his legs and meets with Diaz, becoming his bitch in the process. With one rival down, Diaz helps you transport Gonzalez to the airport to fly him out of town, allowing himself to put all his focus on the big dogs of Vice City. Switching back over to Lance for a minute, it's at this point of the game where we start to see him unravel a bit. It starts out with him freaking out over yours and his places being bugged by the DEA, which leads to you having to take out these police antenna towers all over town before any evidence can be collected. Afterwards, Lance informs you that some of your drugs have gone missing, and when Vic asks about who took it, Lance hesitates as he tries to come up with a scapegoat before ultimately putting the blame onto the bikers. But it's pretty obvious that after dealing with the stress of having to work for the Mendezes and possibly getting locked up, he's the one who's been dipping into the supply. Sure enough, after you confront and kill all the bikers at one of their hideouts, Lance plays dumb and tells you that he couldn't find the stash, telling you that they probably already sold it. In the next mission, Lance goes completely off the deep end when Vic catches him all coked up with Louise, who we'll talk about in a minute. Fed up with Vic's constant scolding and disapproval, and fueled by the drugs, Lance decides to let it snow over Vice City as he drops it all out of a helicopter, forcing you to have to pick the packages of coke back up as you chase him with a hovercraft. After you recollect all the coke, you go back to Lance's to find him crashed on the couch, completely unaware of the bender he'd just been on. Meanwhile, you get a call from Louise saying that she's in danger, but during your previous interaction with her at Lance's, she and Vic got into a fight after he thought she'd slept with Lance while high on coke, whereas she was upset that he'd been too focused on drug dealing to spend any time with her, and this ultimately led to them breaking up. However, it's at this point that Jerry Martinez returns to the fold, and since he thinks that Vic and Louise are still together, he sends his men to follow and kidnap her, leading to this phone call. In spite of their breakup, Vic rushes across the city to find Louise dying in the front of a car, getting there just in time to take her to the hospital and save her life. But as if things couldn't get any worse for the Vances, in their next meeting with the Mendezes, they're told that their debt has been paid and that they're absolved of their wrath. But in return, Vic and Lance must surrender their entire empire to the Mendez cartel. The Vances are obviously reluctant to do so, which leads to the Mendezes' men knocking them out without a second thought. Vic and Lance are then transported to a fuel depot to be executed. But thanks to nothing else but plot armor, you're able to wake up just in time to dodge the cartel's bullets and make your escape. But even though you survived this encounter, you're now fighting a war on two fronts as the Mendezes, just like Martinez, want you dead. However, for once, Lance comes up with a plan to weaken their forces and create an opening to go on the offensive. And this is where everything from the story so far starts to tie back together to build towards the finale. After summoning Phil Cassidy and Machete, Umberto Robina, you all split up and go defend parts of your empire from the Mendezes. Now, I'll say right now that I like the idea of this mission. You raise an army out of the allies that you've made throughout the game to fight your imposing opposition head on. But the way they executed it is not what I'm a big fan of, because right at the start of the mission, Phil goes with Umberto and his gang to some unspecified businesses of yours while you go with Lance, who you've already been fighting alongside for about half the game now. Like, this could have been a really cool reunion where you feel like part of a hit squad taking the fight to your rivals. Kind of like how in San Andreas, CJ was always part of a team with Sweet, Ryder, and Big Smoke at the beginning of the game, but instead, all we have is Lance and a few generic gangsters at each business. Oh well, at least the cutscene made it feel like some of those jobs you completed and favors that you did earlier in the story were paying off here, but I just wish the mission itself carried out that feeling. Either way, now that you've successfully defended against the Mendezes' attack, it's almost time for you to go on the offensive. Before you can hit him back though, Martinez contacts Lance and threatens to pay Louise a visit in the hospital. When Vic catches wind of this, he drops everything to rush back to the hospital and take Louise someplace safe, which leaves Lance to take care of a deal all by himself. However, when you arrive to pick up Louise, Lance pages you in need of help, prompting you to take Louise and fly a helicopter out to the deal. Once you find Lance, it's revealed that this is all part of Martinez's plan. By threatening Louise's life, Martinez had successfully split up the Vance brothers and looked to take advantage by eliminating Lance, only for you to show up at the last minute, save them both, and retrieve your cash from Martinez's goons. And speaking of saving people, now it's time to save Rennie, who's been marked for death by Diego Mendez for putting you in contact with Ricardo Diaz. Ultimately, you fend off the Mendez's men and help Rennie escape to the airport so that she could fly back to Europe. With that loose end tied, it's finally time to bring the fight to the Mendez brothers. In pursuit of revenge for what the Mendezes had done to them, the Vances seek to bankrupt the cartel by working with Diaz to destroy their bearer bonds. In retaliation, however, the Mendezes kidnap Louise and capture Lance, sentencing them both to death as you attempt to rescue them. When you fight through the cartel and break into the Mendezes' mansion, you're confronted by Armando, who informs you that Lance and Louise are already dead, and threatens that you'll be joining them very soon. This leads to a battle against a flamethrower-wielding Armando Mendez. After you kill him, and Vic rushes upstairs to find Louise on the floor and covered in blood. Too late to save her, but just in time to say goodbye. Now, I won't lie, this part of the story was unfortunately spoiled for me already. I've seen the odd video or Reddit post here and there talking about how Louise is one of the most tragic characters in all of Grand Theft Auto, and after playing through this story, I could finally understand why. She lived in an abusive relationship with a man who treated her like shit for a long enough time to have a baby with him, but through those first few interactions with her at the trailer park, you could tell that a person like her deserved a way better hand than she'd been dealt. And just when it looked like she might have a chance at living a better life for her and her child, it was all lost as a casualty of Vic's drug war. Even after having it spoiled for me, to finally see Louise suffer this fate, it really hit me hard, even if she's just a fictional character. Because the sad reality is there are so many cases of good people dying for bad things in real life, and Louise is just a depiction of this kind of tragedy. As sad as Louise's death is though, this becomes Vic's canon event, and from this point on, his objective is to exterminate Diego Mendez and Jerry Martinez once and for all. This takes us back to Diaz, who hatches a plan to take out the remaining Mendez and become the kingpin of Vice City's drug trade. But in order to execute this plan, you need to invade your old army base and steal an attack helicopter in a mission that really feels like it brings the story full circle. And as if that wasn't enough, you even get to roll with Phil Cassidy one last time. Drunk and distraught over his cousin's death, Phil causes a distraction, which admittedly is less of a distraction and more of an act of terrorism, that allows you to get into the base unnoticed. And from there, it's up to you to stealthily infiltrate the admin building, unlock the gate the helicopter is secured behind, and take the thing back to Diaz's mansion. With the chopper acquired, you fly it to Mendez's hideout and assault the building until you get shot down, forcing you to land on the roof and take out the cartel members face to face. Partway through this skirmish, Martinez arrives on the roof of the building as Vic finds Mendez, who flees to the rooftop. As you give chase, more of Mendez's men arrive to slow you down while Martinez's chopper shoots at you from outside the building, forcing you to deal with both before you can advance. Once all their respective reinforcements are diminished, Vic goes up to the roof where he's confronted by Martinez, who is then confronted by Mendez. As our protagonist faces off against both of his remaining antagonists in a Mexican standoff, the final battle for victory begins as all three men try to kill each other. Or at least, I'm sure that's the narrative, but when it comes down to the actual gameplay, it's more of Mendez and Martinez teaming up to try and kill you. In the end, Vic takes them both down, just before Lance arrives to help in a comically relieving moment. But just before the game comes to an end, Lance tells Vic about another supply of coke that he's gotten a hold of and wants to sell, which leads to Vic just about blowing up at Lance as he tells him adamantly that he wants out of the drug business. By the end of it, Lance finally accepts Vic's wishes and agrees to leave town and lay low with him as they finally pay for their brother's medical bills. And that's the story of Vice City Stories, which you still shouldn't get confused for Vice City Story. Wow, I did not expect to end up dedicating 10 whole pages of the script to just that. But I guess it just goes to show how much Rockstar packed into what was originally just a PSP game. But I won't lie though, there are still parts of the story that didn't quite make a lot of sense to me. For one, and I already talked about this a little bit earlier. Wait, another one? Crap, alright, one sec.
The biggest mistake? Being born.
Okay, hopefully that's the last one. Now then, one thing that I've been struggling to get my head around is how Vic is supposed to have this integrity and moral issue with selling drugs, but every time he's faced with the dilemma of violating his principles, he always opts to do so for one reason or another. And look, before you come at me in the comments, I get it. A lot of the time, he doesn't have a real choice, like when the Mendezes forced him to help grow their coke empire. Hell, I'll even forgive his picking up of Martinez's drugs back at the start of the game, because he was in what seemed like a desperate need of cash for his brother's medical bills. But there are other times when he very easily could have stuck to his guns and prevented so much wrong. Let's go back to Martinez's shipment that Lance had heard about. If Vic had stayed true to his morals and refused to get involved, he could have stayed off Martinez's radar, neither of the Vances would have had to worry about the Mendezes, and Louise would have lived. And I'm sure by this point, the Vance crime family was making enough money off their protection, loan shark, and prostitution rings that Vic could easily pay for his brother's medical bills and still get by. And if Martinez really is still a worry by that point, my man could just lay low and probably control the family from outside of Vice City. Or hell, he might even be able to move somewhere else like San Andreas and start a criminal empire there. But even while knowing that dealing with drugs leads to nothing but trouble, once he found out about Martinez's involvement, he chose revenge, and the dominoes proceeded to topple towards that trouble. And one other instance of him having a choice was when he was working for Gonzalez. Now, if I'm understanding the story correctly, dealing with his drugs was nothing more than a favor for Rennie that he very easily could have said no to. Now granted, at least this is a chain of missions that doesn't really affect the outcome of the story in the grand scheme of things, but still, it acts as another opportunity that Vic passed up on to say no. And of course, I have to mention again that at the very end of the story, Vic finally stood up for his beliefs and declined to help Lance sell his shipment of drugs. However, it can be inferred that he eventually gave cave into Lance's bargaining, seeing as how Vic is the one selling the drugs to Tommy Vercetti in the opening cutscene of Vice City. But I do understand that if Vic had been able to avoid working with drugs, we wouldn't have nearly as interesting of a story, and therefore, Vice City stories wouldn't be as great as it is. So, for the sake of allowing a Grand Theft Auto game to be a Grand Theft Auto game, and to allow myself to enjoy the ride, I'm willing to suspend my annoyance with Vic's lack of integrity, but I still think it's an issue with the plot that shouldn't be ignored. But speaking of Vice City, I have to say, something that Vice City Stories did an amazing job at was building a backstory for its predecessor. Just as life can be described as a never-ending cycle of events that cause events in a grand butterfly effect, the events of Vice City Stories set in motion the chain of events that take place 2 years later in Vice City proper. When we meet Phil Cassidy in Vice City, he's a drunken buffoon who gets his arm blown off. But in Stories, we find out the reason that he's like that is because he's been using drinking as a coping mechanism to deal with the loss of his cousin. And before anyone argues that he was already a drunk, it's made very clear in the penultimate mission that his alcohol abuse becomes significantly worse following Luiza's death. Also, near the beginning of Vice City, we're tasked by Colonel Cortez with killing his longtime confidant, Gonzalez, who he suspects had leaked details of the drug deal to Ricardo Diaz before the opening cutscene. As such, in Stories, we get to see the development where Gonzalez is forced to betray Cortez by secretly working for Diaz, which, here's another interesting domino effect for you. If Vic hadn't helped Diaz take control of Gonzalez, the deal at the start of Vice City wouldn't have went south, and Vic wouldn't have been killed, which is all the more reason why Vic should have just stayed away from the drugs. And while this one should go without saying, I'm going to mention it anyway before I move on because of how major it is. In Vice City, there's only one big player in the drug game, Ricardo Diaz. But in Stories, we get to witness and take part in the events that lead to Diaz consuming his competitors' empires, first being Gonzalez and then the Mendez's, before settling in as Vice City's king of cocaine. Okay, I've talked way too much about the story at this point, so let's finally move on to something completely different. The missions. Right, I realize it sounds like a way to keep going on about the story, but the reason why I'm putting the missions themselves in a different chapter is because of the large variety of missions that we get to play through in this game. So let's take a few moments to talk about the uniqueness of them. The first mission I want to mention is Boomshine Blowout. Now the context for this one is that the Cholos, who Phil Cassidy's been at war with, have booby-trapped his Boomshine warehouse. After he tries to get in, an explosion goes off that sets the place on fire. So to prevent Little Havana and Little Haiti from feeling the effects of a small nuclear blast, you have to use a forklift to load Phil's truck up with his Boomshine before the fire blows it all up. Now this is a mission that resembles San Andreas' robbing Uncle Sam at first glance, but with each crate of Boomshine that you recover, the fire gets progressively worse, forcing you to alter your path in order to reach the other crates. And as somebody who had just recently played Liberty City Stories for the first time and had grown accustomed to the simple mission template of either just driving somewhere, killing someone, or some combination of the two, this was a very welcome surprise of a mission concept. But it wouldn't be the only time that Vice City Stories' mission structure deviated from the default pattern. Another unique mission is the one for Frank Vega. Fuck!
Umberto fucking Robina.
Anyway, in this mission called Nice Package, Umberto needs to find out if you've got any balls. So he tasks you with collecting a package while other members of his gang try to beat you to it. The best way I can describe this mission is sort of like a game of capture the flag, as you have to fight the other gangsters to retrieve the package and bring it to a rendezvous point in Viceport. The next mission I want to talk about is called Brawn of the Dead. This is the mission where you go to meet the buyer for that shipment that you stole from Martinez. But before you can sell it to this director, he needs you to perform as a stuntman for his movie. Once the reins are off and the mission begins, your objective simply becomes to shoot these zombie actors with what I have to assume is a prop shotgun, or otherwise we might have another Alec Baldwin situation on our hands here. Either way, what we get here in the first part of the mission is a solid minute of locking onto these slow moving targets and just blasting them with an infinite ammo shotgun. Next, we're given a katana and have to defend this record store from the zombies for a minute and a half. Now while I personally like the shotgun part more, this is still a pretty fun part of the mission, and as a whole, a power fantasy on this scale isn't something that you got very often in this generation of Grand Theft Auto, so it's definitely a mission that I can personally appreciate. One more mission I want to go a bit in depth on is the one called Domo Arigato Domestabato. Now this might be one of the most unique missions in all of GTA, because this one sees us take control of this Wall-E looking cleaning robot called Domestabot, as we're tasked with finding and destroying the Mendez's bearer bonds. Along the way, however, we're occasionally interrupted by Armando Mendez giving Domestabot orders, such as cleaning a room or lighting up his smokes. In order to complete these objectives, we're given a selection of Mouska tools for each job, including the cleaning arm, the grabber arm, the lighter arm, the comms arm, and the well, yeah, you can make up your own name for this one. Anyway, the most important tool is the comms arm, as this is the one that you'll need in order to find the safe. Once you locate it, all you have to do is crack the safe, switch to your lighter arm, and burn the Mendez cartel's treasury. Now, I honestly think this is a really cool mission, as this is one of the very few missions before GTA 5 that actually gives you a first-person perspective. And it's just very different due to the fact that you get to drive this robot around the inside of the Mendez's mansion. Sure, the screen does look a bit janky with the old camera filter over it, and getting sidetracked with Armando's orders may get a bit tedious, but this is still still a novelty experience overall that I can get behind. No, not like that! Anyway, that's the last mission that I'm going to go into detail on for a minute, but I want to give a few honorable mentions to some of the other missions of the game real quick. First is When Fun Day Comes, which isn't anything more than a racing mission at its core, but this is the only time I can think of where you get to race ATVs in the 3D universe. Plus, it gives me some fun flashbacks to the local liquor store from San Andreas, so that's a nice bonus. Jive Drive is another fun mission that sees you in the passenger seat having to fend off enemies while Lance is the one driving for once. Considering how in almost every other mission in Grand Theft Auto, you're always the one having to drive while your allies are the ones shooting, I always like a nice change of pace where you're the one pulling the trigger as you defend your driver. And again, this is a mission that gives me some San Andreas nostalgia from its mission, Just Business. Next up, accidents will happen, which is kind of like a typical race against the clock, but it adds the unique element of being able to drive right through these stunt cars to destroy them on impact, which was a really fun addition. Then we've got Highwire, a mission where we have to take a helicopter and use its magnet to carry these shipping containers out of the police impound, and then we must pick up a car and take it to safety at the end. Speaking of helicopters, we also have the Colonel's Coke, a mission where we use an attack helicopter with a couple of gangsters to defend Gonzalez's boat against attackers. Also, I just want to say real quick, one thing that I hate and love about Vice City Stories is the AI's aimbot. I'll get more into it later, but let me just say for now that watching these guys on my helicopter absolutely shred anything that gets near the boat fills me with joy knowing that I'm on the same side as the aimbots for once. Next is Purple Haze, which is a mission that starts off like any other. But about halfway through, Vic ends up getting inadvertently high off the supply, which let's just say gives this mission a very Vice City-like vibe. Lastly, we have both Taking the Fall and Lost and Found. I'm grouping these two together because they both share an interesting mechanic that only appears in these missions and never again in Grand Theft Auto. And it's the way that you have to keep your helicopter balanced in order for Lance to be able to shoot. Like I said a minute ago, the AI in this game can absolutely shred anything in their path thanks to their aimbot. So I kind of liked how this mechanic tried to balance that detail out a little bit, even if it was very easy to work around. But hey, A for effort. But the missions in this game weren't all sunshine and rainbows from code-fueled hallucinations. Every Grand Theft Auto game has its infamously tough missions. San Andreas has Wrong Side of the Tracks, Vice City's got Demolition Man, GTA 3 has, well, its entire third act, but more specifically Espresso to Go. And Vice City Stories is no different with Hose the Hose. Now this mission doesn't get its reputation from some unfair aimbots or any tight time constraints or even just some bullshit setup. No, the root of this mission's difficulty comes from the fact that it's incredibly unclear where the fuck you have to spray the water from this fire truck in order to put these fires out. On paper, this should be one of the easiest missions in the game, but in reality, I'm convinced that somebody replaced the water in this fire truck with gasoline, because it feels like the fire only grows bigger the longer I try to put it out. And just to make sure my game wasn't bugged or anything, I had to look up a guide to see if I was doing this mission right, and what I found out is that for some of these fires, you can't aim the water where it looks like the base of the fire is, because for whatever reason, the base is actually inside the building itself, and is therefore much lower. Once you figure that out, it's pretty much just guesswork for putting out this couple of fires. But it was still pretty frustrating to feel like my game was glitching out. Next, let's talk about From Zero to Hero. This is another mission that sounds easy on paper. Go through a quick shootout, steal these armored trucks, drive them with Lance while dealing with rival gangsters, cops, and even an attack helicopter, and secure them at Lance's house. Not too bad, right? Except in my playthrough, I just kept on failing this mission for one reason or another. Once you have the trucks, that's when it all starts going to hell, because now it's on you to somehow survive going from the dock to the bridge while these cars relentlessly shoot at you. And you have a buddy in your passenger seat who could help you defend your cargo, but he just doesn't, because why do that when you could just not instead, you know? And what's even more annoying is that you can't even defend yourself either, since you're so high up in the truck that your bullets can't hit the cars. Now I know what you're thinking, why don't you just try outrunning the cars? Well, like I said, Lance is driving the other truck, and if you fall too far behind him, you fail the mission. But not only that, if you manage to overtake him and then drive too far ahead of him, you fail the mission. So why don't you just get out and destroy the cars quickly before you lose Lance, you're saying? Because they'll just fucking respawn anyway. No, it's not a skill issue, it's a goddamn RNG issue, because passing this mission requires you to be lucky enough that the AI doesn't fire as many bullets as they possibly can before you reach the bridge. Hose the Hose might have been frustrating on a mechanical level, but From Zero to Hero is one of those missions that would have driven me insane had it not been for the existence of save states on PCSX2. Plus 1 point for emulation. Next on the list is Blitzkrieg Strikes Again. This is the mission that tricks you into thinking that you're going to be teaming up with Phil Cassidy and that one guy from Call of the Dead, but instead all you have is Lance. Although in hindsight, that's probably for the best, seeing as how a few extra NPCs to have to babysit probably would have made this mission even more miserable to sit through. One common problem that you'll find with Lance in this game is that he's constantly running balls first into danger without even considering the possibility that he could die. And no, that's not just a mechanic of his AI, that's literally part of his character. Check out this cutscene of him literally running through gunfire as he enters the Mendez's mansion if you need clarification. Side note, if that's not the textbook definition of plot armor, I don't know what the hell is. But unfortunately, Lance not only forgets his plot armor in this one, but he apparently forgot his fucking body armor too, because his health just evaporates if you stop protecting him for even just a couple of seconds. After a few tries in this mission, it got to the point where it was easier for me to just run the enemies over, and never give Lance Vance a chance to entrance his fancy pants and dance out of the car out of fear that he'd just get obliterated. The mugshot long shot was another mission fucking hell. Give me a quick second here. Okay, that had better be the last one. Anyway, the mugshot long shot is another one that I struggled with a bit thanks to the incredibly aggressive 4-star wanted level that gets dropped on you as soon as you finish the tedious tailing segment of this mission. In my first attempt, I honestly went kind of smooth brain and tried taking this weird walkway up to the road instead of going back the way I came. As you can see, this didn't go too well. Attempt number 2, and this time I have a strategy. Now that I know about the wanted level, I can plan accordingly, get a route in place to escape to the paint spray, and wait, what do you mean you can't spray this? What do you mean this is a cop car? What do you mean I'm completely fucked? Alright, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. This path I found will surely lead to some... well, shit. Well, I guess I could make a run for it. Oh, hey, look! A car I can use in the paint spray. Wait, why is it full of cops? Oh, come on! Right, third time's the charm. I've got my route, I've got my ride. All I need to do is... where the fuck did he just come from? Well, car's on fire. Let's switch over. Fuck you. Let's switch over to this limo, and... oh, thank God. Okay, so this mission isn't exactly the hardest in the game by any means, but the way they just dropped this heavy wanted level on you out of nowhere and expects you to get through it with little stress is kind of fucked. And honestly, I got really lucky with the fact that it only took me 3 tries to beat this. Given the fact that civilian car spawns are significantly rarer when you have a higher wanted level, this limo just so happening to be in this exact spot in this exact moment was a godsend. One last mission, and then we'll move on. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for everybody's favorite mission in all of Grand Theft Auto, unfriendly competition. Right, I know I already said that Hose the Hose was Vice City Stories' infamously difficult mission like Wrong Side of the Tracks in San Andreas, but the thing is, both of those missions are easy to complete if you know what you're doing. Unfriendly competition, on the other hand, is more like Supply Lines in the sense that it's going to be insanely difficult no matter what. Okay, I know Supply Lines is significantly easier if you just taxi around your targets, but playing it the way it was intended is nearly impossible, and it seems like a lot of other people agree with me on this one. After doing some research and looking around on some forums, the common consensus seems to be that this right here is the hardest mission in Vice City Stories. It starts out simple enough. Armando Mendez instructs you to kill a couple of rival drug dealers in Vice City. You go to the first one, wipe everyone out, and think to yourself, well, that was pretty easy. This next one shouldn't be too hard to take down at all. And then you get to the next guy, and I'll just let this cutscene do the talking for me.
Well, this is a public execution. Holy shit! Get him, girls! Motherfucker.
My thoughts exactly, Vic. What follows is indeed a public execution, only you're the one on the receiving end of it. Once again, I admittedly ended up using a save state sort of as a safety net on my second attempt at this mission, but luckily I didn't end up having to use it. Still though, this part of the mission is absolutely brutal given the fact that you start off in the center of a firing squad and have to fight your way over to some cover. But as if that wasn't bad enough, this mission goes on for a while since the enemies just keep on respawning, some of them right next to you, making this feel like an endless wave of torment as all you can do is just try to survive. The one saving grace in this mission is that this health pickup does respawn a few times, making this mission actually passable, but only just barely. In summary, Vice City Stories' missions are pretty fun to play through overall, though there are some tricky and challenging missions that you have to put up with in order to advance through the story, or at least, those were the ones that I had trouble with. Everybody's different. I know there's some people out there who had difficulty beating Boomshine Blowout, including Jordan Ducksauce, who commented about this mission on my Liberty City Stories video, which by the way, if you've enjoyed this video so far, you'd probably enjoy that one too. So if you've got the time, I'd highly recommend that you check it out once you finish this video. But as for me, I was able to beat Boomshine Blowout on my first try. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who had no trouble beating one of the missions that I said was difficult first try. Like I said, everybody's different, and this is just my personal opinion that you're free to agree or disagree with. But apart from all of that though, let's finally move forward to our next topic. This game has Phil Collins in it, and that's pretty cool. Alright, now I don't mean to keep plugging this, but if you've seen my Liberty City Stories video, you probably already know that both Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories are GTA games that have eluded me my whole life until earlier this year. But that's not to say that I've heard absolutely nothing about them. While Liberty City Stories did a better job at staying under my radar, one of Vice City Stories' main selling points that I've heard a lot about is its empire building system. As I mentioned earlier, after you play through a bit of the game's story, Vic starts the Vance crime family, which unlocks the ability to start taking over businesses from rival gangs and begin establishing your own businesses in their place. At the start start, these businesses only include a protection racket, loan sharking, and prostitution. But as you progress through the story, you eventually unlock bases for drugs, smuggling, and robbery. In order to acquire a business, you typically have to start an attack on it by destroying the rival gang's vehicle parked outside of it. Once you do that, gang members will start spawning to defend the business, and after you kill them all, you're able to enter the building. Inside, there'll be a few more gangsters to take out, as well as some equipment that you'll have to destroy. But once all that's done, a for sale sign will go up outside the business, allowing you to buy it and add it to your empire. After you purchase the building, you have the choice to turn it into any of the businesses I listed earlier, as long as you have it unlocked. And then you can decide how large of a business you want it to become. Depending on which business and the size that you choose, that will determine how much money that business starts to generate for you. And every day, all the money from each of your businesses will be deposited directly into your wallet. Wait, so they have the technology to instantly cash at me all my money. Then why the hell am I still stuck using this fucking pager? Anyway, you can also increase the amount of money that each business can generate by completing missions for each business type. This is a pretty fun and unique way to sort of level up your business's skill levels. And for the most part, I think Rockstar really nailed this aspect of the game. The only thing I don't like though is how some of these missions can get insanely difficult, but at least doing these isn't mandatory to finish the game. Dude, are you fucking kidding me? Another one? Alright, fine, let me take care of this again. Right, so as I was saying, what? Again? But fine, whatever, let's just get it over with. Okay, now you're just fucking with me. Actually, you know what? This is great timing, because I was just getting to this anyway. So taking over businesses from rival gangs comes at a bit of a price. Much like how in San Andreas, waging war and taking over a gang territory might result in some of the rival gangs provoking a war of their own to take it back, Vice City Stories has a system of its own that allows rival gangs to retaliate against you. That brings us to the hate system, and it's pretty simple. Basically, whenever you take over a rival gang's business, their hatred towards you starts to grow, and thus they become more aggressive towards you. Not only does this mean that they're more likely to target you on the streets of Vice City, but it also means they'll become relentless in launching their own attacks on your businesses. In theory, this is a great idea and it helps immerse the player into this world by making them feel like their actions have consequences. In execution, however, this becomes such a fucking nuisance to constantly have to deal with. I will be on the other end of the map, ready to start a mission, and then be expected to drive all the way back to my business before its damage meter fills. Then, even if I do get there in time and successfully defend it, as soon as I drive off, the exact same business gets attacked again. At first, I was fine with dropping everything to go defend my businesses because it's part of the game and it's what you're supposed to do. But to put it in perspective, I spent over 20 minutes going back and forth putting out these fires as soon as I hopped back on here one day. And I only had about an hour to play before I had to take care of some IRL stuff, which means I spent nearly half of it getting nothing done because of these distractions. But after a while, I just said fuck it and started letting them fend for themselves because it just was not worth my time. And it really didn't have any negative impacts apart from my daily earnings slightly decreasing, so I think I made the right call. Over the years, I've heard about how this empire building system was an absolutely incredible idea that could have made GTA Vice City into an even greater game by adding on to, or even replacing, its asset building system. And despite the negatives that came with it, I think I have to agree with that. By the end of Vice City, Tommy Vercetti takes over the entire town through his vast empire of assets. But if you could have had all these additional businesses and strongholds scattered throughout both islands, it would have truly felt like this was his land. I guess that's one benefit of being able to come back around to an old map with new experiences gained after creating it. And no, I'm not trying to say that Vice City Stories is some sort of second chance for Vice City, like how Liberty City Stories was a second chance for GTA 3 in my opinion. I'm just saying that it proved to be worthwhile for Rockstar to take some of the things like gang territories in San Andreas and bring them back around to Vice City with their own local twist. In all, I think the empire building system was a very valuable addition to Vice City Stories. And while the constant gang attacks do become quite tedious after a while, it's still something I could see my younger self getting immersed in for hours if he had this game for the PSP or the PS2. And even today, it's still a fairly fun feature, flaws and all. Alright, so as far as mechanics go in this one, we're pretty much looking at a copy and paste from Liberty City Stories. Much like in that game, you can't crouch, you can't climb, and you can't swim. Wait, what? You mean, you can... in Vice City? But what about the sharks? What about the tide? What about being black? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Wait a minute, does that mean CJ... Yes, racial stereotypes aside, Vic Vance is officially the second GTA protagonist to know how to swim, and the first one chronologically. I wonder if that means police primarily choke out white suspects in this universe. Regardless, while swimming is finally a thing that you can do in Vice City, don't get too comfortable, because Vic has a stamina bar that appears as soon as he's in the water. And if that runs out, well, I guess that's the shark's equivalent of the 5-second rule. Other than that, Vice City Stories plays very similarly to Liberty City Stories from a gameplay perspective. As I said, you still can't climb, unless it's to get out of the water, which is a little annoying since this is a feature that exists in San Andreas. You still can't crouch, which is even more annoying because this is a feature that existed in Vice City. But hey, at least you can still have fun, since this wasn't a feature in GTA 3. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to take a pot shot at GTA 3 like that after seeing so many comments talking about how I was too harsh on it in my last video. I guess I should probably apologize to that one GTA 3 stan who's made it this far into the video, and he's already disliked it, commented that I don't know shot, and clicked off the video all within the span of 2 seconds. You know what? I'm not even mad. I respect the hate-fueled grind set. Wait, what the hell was I talking about? Oh, yeah, mechanics. Well, the shooting's pretty much the same as Liberty City Stories in the sense that you're stationary whenever you're aiming most guns, as well as how you have the ability to free aim. One thing that's notably different is how when you're aiming at somebody, the remaining health is represented by the color of the triangular target surrounding them, which I very much prefer over Liberty City Stories' version of this targeting system that darkens the color of the triangles as your target's health lowers, since it's easier to determine whether or not your enemy is dead. They seem to have also revamped the melee combat this time around, though this is one of those upgrades that's really more of a downgrade since it's so easy to get stun locked, allowing your enemy to just drain your health. But that's pretty much it as far as your own personal mechanics are concerned. As for the AI, there's one instance that really differentiates them from the AI in any other GTA that I've played, apart from maybe GTA Online, and it's not at all in a good way. Like I mentioned earlier, whenever the AI is shooting at someone from a car, they absolutely tear through their target as if they're firing a minigun. For whatever reason, the fire of an NPC's gun kicks up to Super Monkey times 10 whenever they're in a vehicle. And if you have 3 of these motherfuckers spraying you down, you had better accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior right then and there, or you're about to meet the devil in the next 2.5 seconds. But yeah, there are times when you're on the other end of the AI firing squad, and you just get to watch your homies fucking obliterate whatever's in their path. But oftentimes, it's you who's getting annihilated. And when you can't lock onto your attackers because they're in a car, and when your free aim is unresponsive as all hell because this is a PSP port, you are more than likely fucked, my boy. Fucked. Oh wait, one more thing I gotta mention real quick. Now this is such a tiny feature that we take for granted in modern GTA games nowadays, but holy fuck, if there was ever a quality of life improvement that every GTA from this era could have used, it was the ability to buy back your weapons whenever you died or got busted. Now this is a game that you're going to die a lot in. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, unless you're a speedrunner or some shit, in which case all bets were always off. So to have the opportunity to spend a minor fee rather than go out of your way to ammunition and drop a fortune on restocking your arsenal, it makes this game significantly better and less frustrating to play than it ever would have been without it. See guys, I told you we weren't living on the cursed timeline. We still miss you, Harambe. Now by this point, I've already finished the script and started editing the video, but something I forgot I wanted to talk about, at least briefly, was the customization options for Vic. And as out of place as it may be to talk about clothing in the chapter about game mechanics, I can't think of anywhere better to put this in at, so here we are. Anyway, apart from Vic's army clothes that are only available at the beginning of the game, as well as at the very end, you can unlock a fair variety of outfits as you progress through the game. Starting off with Minecraft Steve, you're also able to unlock Leisure, Carl Johnson, Cuban Style, the Pastel Suit, the Tracksuit, has been living in Detroit for 5 minutes. No, not because he's black. It's because it's so cold up here. God, not everything's gotta be racist.
Yeah, so? I'm from Green Bay, genius. It's cold there.
Hired Muscle, Lewis from Left 4 Dead, Smuggler, Smart Suit, Winner, and the Wetsuit. Right, you probably noticed that these clothing options aren't really groundbreaking or anything compared to other 3D Universe GTA games, especially considering this one came out after San Andreas. So why was it so important that I add in this little section at the last minute? Well, for one, I just had to share the nicknames that I came up with for some of the outfits. And two, yes, even though the ability to change your outfit isn't exactly a groundbreaking feature, it still contains some really cool and unique clothing options that I feel do a great job at helping establish Vic's current criminal status whenever they're unlocked through the story, as well as help you fit in with whichever corner of the criminal underworld you're trying to conquer while you're completing missions for said enterprise of your empire. Okay, this is something I've purposely avoided talking about because I thought it'd be kind of funny to just completely downplay this cameo. But I'm gonna say right now that it's super fucking cool that they got Phil Collins to not just appear in this game, but be the focal point of several missions and even perform his own concert in-game. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not a Phil Collins stan or nothing like that. I only know a couple of his songs, and yes, the only reason I know I Don't Care Anymore is because of GTA 5. But while I can't say I care too much for In the Air Tonight before playing this game, seeing his character model slowly walk around the stage before sitting down and going to town on the drums as he performs in front of nobody? Oh well, at least we know Vic's watching. Okay, hardware limitations aside, this cutscene of him performing this concert has genuinely made this one of my favorite classic rock songs to listen to. And speaking of songs, that's right, it's time for everybody's favorite part of the video. The part where I alienate my entire audience by disagreeing with everybody's musical taste. Okay, let's be real for a second. Music is very, Very subjective. Everybody's musical taste is different, so chances are you're gonna find a few things to disagree with me on in this section of the video, but that's okay. If you've ever played through Vice City Stories, then I'm sure you have your own favorite songs on your own favorite radio stations, and I have mine, and that's totally fine. Let's just agree to disagree. Or you can tell me I suck in the comments and dislike the video, that's cool too, I guess. Right, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the controversial stuff. Let's talk music. First and foremost, we've got to talk about V-Rock. This was my favorite station in Vice City, and that statement has not changed in Stories. Just like last time, this station is packed full of amazing and iconic 80s songs like Round and Round, Holy Diver, Rock You Like a Hurricane, and even Stranglehold, which is a song that's lived rent-free in my head ever since I booted up Vice City Stories for the first time a few weeks ago. But on top of all of that, we've also got the representation of a great roster of 80s rock bands on the station, including Judas Priest, Kiss, Quiet Riot, and Motley Crue. All in all, V-Rock was the station I listened to the absolute most while playing through Vice City Stories. My only complaints about it is that there weren't as many songs on the station this time around, which could have been due to storage limitations on the PSP, and that it also felt like there was a distinct lack of artists like Ozzy Osbourne and Megadeth who we got to hear in Vice City. But I'd say Cousin Ed's bullying of Laszlo did a pretty good job of making up for these things. However, the noticeable shortage of songs did lead to V-Rock getting a little bit stale after a while, so whenever I needed some variety, I would just let whichever random station that happened to be playing whenever I stole a car go ahead and serenade me with its flavor of 80s nostalgia. Flash FM usually did a great job at keeping my ears happy with its set list of songs, which included Scandal's The Warrior and Love is a Battlefield by Pat Benatar. Also, quick shout out to Radio Espantoso for its couple of songs that I recognize enough to be willing to give the rest of the station a chance. Those songs were I Like It Like That, and Oye Como Va, the latter of which is always a joy to listen to. Emotion 98.3 also had a few bangers on there with Baby Hold On by Eddie Money, We Belong by Pat Benatar, and of course, In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. But as we all know, it wouldn't be a GTA game without its talk shows on the radio. And that brings us to Vice City Public Radio. Now, much like how Liberty City Stories took GTA 3's Chatterbox and put it into a broader station with other talk shows on it, Vice City Stories sort of does the same thing by adding 2 new shows to run alongside pressing issues from Vice City. My favorite of these was Bait and Switch with Larry Joe and Bobby Ray, a couple of stereotypical rednecks doing stereotypical redneck shit, or cowboy shit if you will. On this episode of their show, they're coming at you from the local boat show as they talk about how to combine the pleasures of fishing and hunting, and using alcohol to help glue the two together. But in addition to this station's talk shows, we've also got a couple of archived radio stories from the 1940s. These shows do a great job at satirizing the culture of that time period, and they're absolutely hilarious to listen to, especially The Time Ranger, which is a show about a mid-20th century man named Ernest Kegel, a self-deprecating but witty time traveler who's always ready to put a woman in her place. With his time machine, which happens to be located below his belt, he jacks off to travel through time to defend America from terrorists and spread democracy to the past, or something. When I first heard this show after I probably stole someone's car and VCPR happened to be the station I was on, I was intrigued by this show that sounded like if it had ever appeared on TV, it would have been in black and white. But after listening to it for a few minutes, it became something that I was sure to listen to all the way until the end whenever I had the chance because of how funny it was. All in all, I think Vice City Stories nailed their talk show radio station with VCPR. This station is absolutely hilarious, and I'd honestly suggest searching for it on YouTube and listening to the whole thing. It's a little over an hour long, but I would say it's very much worth it. Alright, well I think I've covered about everything I wanted to cover, so now that all that's out there, it's time to explain my reasoning for calling Vice City Stories both good and not as good as I thought it would be. Well, the fact of the matter is, no matter how good Vice City Stories was ever going to be, the sad thing is it was never going to meet my expectations. See, after playing through GTA 3 and having such an awful time, as those of you who've seen my last video are probably tired of hearing by now, I expected Liberty City Stories to take those same things that made me dislike GTA 3 so much, and carry them back into Liberty City to make a somehow even shittier game now that it was stuck on the inferior hardware of the PSP. But no. Instead, Liberty City Stories was able to take so much of the good that Vice City and San Andreas were able to create, and bring them to Liberty City to craft the amazing game that GTA 3 could have and should have been. But as for Vice City Stories, well, the thing is, Vice City was already a great game. It's a game that I genuinely love to come back to every now and then just to fill myself up with the experience of playing it. So what was really left for Vice City Stories to improve upon? Well, there's the obvious answer that it could have just copied all the mechanics and physics from San Andreas and pasted them into the world of Vice City to make that world even more fun to roam around in. But that's such an unrealistic feat for a PSP game to accomplish. Then again, Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories' existences are incredible feats in and of themselves, but that's beside the point. My point is that Vice City Stories, it didn't have a fair chance of meeting my irrational expectations, because what I expected was for it to improve Vice City on a similar level to how Liberty City Stories improved GTA 3, which is like asking a Ford F-250 to be as greater than an F-150 as a Lamborghini is greater than a Model T, or something along those lines. At least I'm not a car guy. In all, Vice City Stories wasn't able to meet my expectations that I had set for it because my expectations expectations were incredibly unrealistic and irrational. No matter what, I was always going to be underwhelmed by how it ended up turning out. But that's okay, because even with knowing that this game wasn't as good as I really thought it was going to be, I can still acknowledge that it's a great game in its own right, and it absolutely deserves to be held on a higher pedestal than it currently has as just a PSP port. And that's one thing that really bugs me now that I've played both of the Stories games, is how the 3D universe is typically referred to as the trilogy, when in reality, it was made up of 5 games that continually set the standard for how to make an immersive open world video game. Okay, maybe I'm embellishing a little bit by making a claim that Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories raised the bar higher than San Andreas, but if they were designed for the PS2 instead of the PSP, I'm positive they would have. Anyway, regardless of how Vice City Stories is perceived by the modern fanbase, I hope I was able to do this game some justice with this video, because it's another great video game from the past that deserves way more love nowadays. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Rockstar is very keen on bringing this game back onto store shelves in any capacity, likely due to licensing issues. But if you do want to play this amazing game like I did, there's still a few ways that you can. If you believe in playing games the way they were meant to be played like a traditionalist, or if emulation isn't your strong suit, you could always acquire GTA Vice City Stories for either the PSP or PS2, or possibly the PS3 I think if you have one with backwards compatibility for that matter. Otherwise, emulation is your only other option since you literally can't get this game anywhere else. For that, your options are either PPSSPP or PCSX2, the emulators for the PSP and PS2 respectively. And if you need help figuring out how to set one of those up, I'd highly suggest just looking up a tutorial on YouTube since there's a ton of random Indian guys that know a whole lot more about this stuff than I do. Alright, here we are, 35 and a half pages into the script, and we're finally fucking done. Jeez, this was a doozy to sit down and write. And I'm sure it'll be an experience in and of itself just to edit this whole thing down. But in the end, I think it'll be worth it considering the overwhelming amount of success my Liberty City Stories video received last month. Speaking of which, I seriously want to thank each and every one of you who watched that video, liked it, subscribed, commented, and whatever. The feeling of joy I've had since that video came out from seeing all those numbers rise, being able to respond to so many positive comments, and finally being able to join the YouTube Partner Program to unlock the ability to earn money after 5 years of making videos has been indescribable. After doing this for so long and seeing so little reward, I've really started to come to terms with the fact that I may have to pursue some other venture in life. But after everything that's happened recently, I finally believe again that I may be able to make these videos and entertain all of you for a living. So seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all. But with that, I think it's time to announce a very important change here on page 36. I know I said at the end of my last video that there wouldn't be an immediate shift in my content as I look towards making video essays like this full time. But unfortunately, I believe that in order to keep the success going, I have to make that hard shift and continue this style of content indefinitely. Don't get me wrong, I don't at all see this as a horrible thing, as I really do like making these types of videos. But for anybody who is looking forward to my next episode of San Andreas 2 Player, I'm sorry to disappoint you by saying this, but it's going to be a while before I'm able to make the next one. But don't worry, I fully plan on finishing that series once I'm able to. And I've also got a few other things still in the vault that I plan on making as well, so stay tuned for that. Alright, one more thing. No, 2 more things, then I'm out of here. First of all, I'm sure you guys are aware that it takes a long time for me to put videos like this together. Hell, it took me about a whole week to play through Vice City Stories, another week to write this script, and who knows how long the editing process is going to take. Anyway, my point is that while a lot of work goes into these videos to give you all the highest quality of content that I can muster, you can also catch me creating another kind of content over on Twitch in the form of live streams. Okay, I know that sentence probably sounded really weird out loud, but it's 3:35 a.m. at the time of writing this, so cut me some slack. Right, so as I was saying, I'm pretty active over on Twitch, so if you want to see me a little bit more frequently, feel free to give me a follow over there. As of the time of this video releases, I'm usually live on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, streaming either Bully or a modded playthrough of GTA 4. So if that's something that interests you at all, then don't hesitate to come on by. Now then, that second thing, I've got my own Discord server. I have a rather small community as of right now, but if you'd like to join, you're more than welcome to, and I'd love to have you there. The links to both my Twitch channel and Discord server will be in the description, and I'll also have them in the comments down below. Okay, now that I've reached the grand total of 37 pages, I feel like this is a good place to wrap things up. Thank you once again to all of you for watching, and thank you all for giving me a possible chance to do this for a living. Until next time, I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.